Greetings and welcome to No BS Baking. Got JP here. Now today I'm going to talk a little bit about flour protein. I want to clear up some of the things with respect to it that I've seen out there online. And on top of that, I want to explain a little bit more about how these numbers are derived at and what they actually mean for you in the kitchen. So it's a little bit longer of a video than I wanted. So without further ado, let's just get at it. As I look around the internet, I often see examples of sites doing comparison videos with different ingredients, processes, or the like. Many are good examples of the effects bakers can expect when trying different ingredients or processing methods to ramp up their baking skills and finished quality. However, I often find that some of these explanations can be a little too general or miss some key information that is important to understand. Many of these comparison tests or experiments are bundled or sold like aha moments for people out there watching, but in most instances they don't tell the whole story. In this video, we're going to talk about flour protein and explain the weird anomalies some videos fail to explain. So let's get into it. Flour strength is determined by the amount of gluten-forming proteins in quantities and ratios that provide optimum gas retention to achieve desired finish characteristics, processing performance, timing, and cost objectives of the baker. Now, I didn't want to get into the technical measuring devices used by milling companies and research gurus around the world. However, to better illustrate the who, what, whens of flour protein and how it can impact you in your kitchen, let's start by taking a look at flour strength and how it's determined. There are a number of scientific tests used to evaluate flour and dough consistencies. However, in this video, we will quickly delve into the farinograph, which is an excellent visual reference to understand protein, mix times, overall flour strength or lack thereof, and which translates for the home baker into the whys of the different flours, why things work this way. The farinograph is a tool used by flour millers and bakers to assess baking qualities and performance of wheat doughs. Now, I didn't want to get too technical, but there is a method to my madness, so bear with me. The farinograph generates a curve that is transferred to paper through mechanical motion, and a typical curve looks something like this. The curve is aligned and placed on a grid-styled paper laid out in Brabender units, which is a unit of measurement developed for the baking industry to measure viscosity of flour and water during mixing. For this example, the important number that we will look at here is the 500 line. The 500 line is the base measurement reference for farinograph curves. Now, we're not going to go too much into this. However, I do want to show you the visual correlation of flour types to strength, mixing, and overall performance, and they do not necessarily translate by protein content. So as I mentioned, the main unit of measurement is the Brabender units. And at the bottom line is, of course, time, all in a grid format so you could map out everything minute by minute. So for the purpose of this example, we'll not delve too deep into all the measurements that the farinograph can report, but let's look at a few of the basics and how this translates down to you in the kitchen. The first measurement that they have there is, of course, the arrival time, and that is when the dough consistency peaks up over the 500 line. The next one is the peak time, which the dough is at its strongest point, toughest point in the mixing process. And then, of course, you have your departure time. Between the arrival time and the departure time is what's referred to as the stability time. And this is the time that the dough remains stable from arrival to departure above the 500 line. Now, these curves tell a story of what you, the baker, can expect from the flour: mixing tolerance, optimum mix times, and how long before you enter the dreaded over-mixing point. Now, the curve I've demonstrated here is easily identified as not a very strong flour due to its short stability time and rapid drop from peak. Now the curve that's shown here in the red is a very strong bread flour. You can see that the curve stays straight for a long time, showing this flour's strength and impressive stability time versus the curve on the right. Now, the degree of softening, or the mixing tolerance index, is a standard calculation for measuring the degree and the rate of softening or breakdown of the gluten. Now, I'm not going to get into it, but if you want to find out more details on this, just Google farinograph and it'll explain it all. Processing time is, of course, from start of the mixing process right through to your departure time. And that is a good indication of your general mix times. Here I've shown a few examples of what the curves may look like for a weak wheat flour all the way to a very strong flour. Now, why I'm showing you this is because these curves tell a story by illustrating what can expect from a particular flour as it pertains to gas retention capabilities, mix times that you should use for it, and overall performance expectations. Now, in the first top left diagram marked weak, we can see that this flour has very little gluten or low improper ratios of gluten and gliadin, which make up the total protein. Now, for more information on this, check out this video that I've just popped in here. It goes into that in more depth. Now, as I mentioned, this flour is most likely a weak or low protein flour like cake flour, or low in gluten like rye flour. However, could this be a high protein flour? Surprisingly, yes. Now, the curve marked medium could be representative of pastry flour, which is generally low in protein like cake flour, or it could be an ancient grain flour like einkorn, kamut, or other durum family flours, which are very high in protein, but weaker in gluten-forming proteins, either by amount, ratio, or even the coarseness of the flour, which can reduce the mixing tolerant index, just like whole wheat. And that's the reason why whole wheat flour, because of the bran and this destructive function of bran when mixing, mix times are reduced when making whole wheat breads. Now, strong and very strong bread flour ride out the curve in a nice straight trajectory. The lower the gluten protein, the less mixing tolerance and stability time is the norm, and therefore bakers should be cognizant of the flour type and what to expect. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video that one can use really high gluten-rich flour and end up with shorter than expected volumes. More gluten, bigger bread, right? Well, this is where many of these baking comparisons and experiment channels fail to deliver. They just don't have it sorted. Let me explain. Generally, wheats are classified either as hard or soft wheats. Now, the modern hard wheat, curve shown in red here, has been bred for gluten strength and produce long horizontal curves that seem to just go on forever with unreal stability times. They often require much longer mixing, difficult to overmix, and most often require more water. Now, soft wheats shown in blue are weaker by comparison, requiring less mix time and often less water. Now, in the case of all-purpose flour, which is a blend of soft and hard wheats, it generally has a curve sitting somewhere in the middle. Now, in this example here, these are two different samples of the same type of flour. Could be from a different manufacturer, whatever, but they're the same flour. Now, these are high protein flours ranging from around 12 to 20%. Now, if you look at the curve at the left, you can see that it is not a strong flour and will take much shorter mix time to develop, and in the case of the first example, drops off quickly and begins to break down in a rather short period of time. All gluten-containing flours are not the same, and in many instances, protein content does not translate into good gas retention or mixing tolerance, so it's always good to know your flour. Study it, learn it. So now, after looking over all those curves and kind of understanding a little bit about what those are telling us, let's get back to the pictures of the samples that we made with the different protein flour. If all of these were made from quality modern white wheat, we can understand why maybe the 9.5% bread is less volume. It's lower protein level, it's weaker. But why is the 14% resulting in less volume? Shouldn't it be at least as good as the 13%? And this was the question that I was looking for to be answered in a comparison video that I saw out there by another channel. They never did answer this. They left it unanswered, and thus I had to make this video. Now, one of the main reasons is that bakers need to understand that for most gluten-rich bread flour, the more protein, the longer and more horizontal the curve. This translates into longer mixing times, and ultimately, the higher the gluten-forming protein, the more mixing is required to give the baker that nice balance of gluten development with the softening and the extensibility that comes with that for optimizing gas retention and the ease of expansion. Now, you can see that this one here has a 20-minute stability time. There's some things that bakers do in order to reduce that. Obviously, you've got temperature issues to think about. You don't want to get into 20-minute mixing. And so there's some steps that bakers take to sort this stuff out. As we talked about, the higher the protein or the lower the protein, there's some water adjustment that needs to be made in there, and of course mixing times have to be made. So let's talk about the 9.5 and the 11. If all things were consistent in this experiment, which I believe they were, produced either lower volume in the case of the 9.5, however the 11 achieved good volume but exhibited a more open grain, most likely associated to overmixing or too much hydration. Now 11 is approximately an all-purpose flour, and so you would assume already that you need to mix a little less, and you will definitely need to reduce the amount of water that you use in it versus a very strong bread flour. Now the 13% bread looked really nice with a good balance of mix time, rest time, and hydration levels. And I think that basically the test was set up to produce a loaf of bread made from a good quality bread flour. Now in the case of the 14% bread, it was shorter in volume, and this is a direct result of undermixing it and potentially underhydrating it. The dough was so strong and did not have the time to soften and develop enough, resulting in a tight gluten structure which impeded the expansion of the bread through both proofing and baking. Now bakers know this, and they take action to fix these issues with little workarounds. And let's just quickly talk about that. So assuming that all the samples were made exactly the same way, then a baker may make the following adjustments without taking into consideration any changes to protein content. In the 9.5, first thing we would do, based on what we know of the curves and how they look, we're going to go with less mix time and a little less water. Now on the 11%, a little bit less mix time than say really strong flours, a little less water, and may want to even add some type of an oxidizing agent, which we'll get into in another video. Now on the 13%, I think this was about perfect for this type of bread. Mix time was okay, water was okay. I think that, and the rest times were all right. I think that was set up to do this one properly. Now on the 14%, definitely longer mix time, potentially more water. Either you go with the longer mix time or you start thinking about adding a reducing agent in there, which we'll get into in another video, and or more rest periods or longer rest periods to allow the natural conditioning effect on the gluten to take place and give you a softer, more extensible type of product. And in summary, flour protein content is not always an indicator of flour strength. As a general rule, as protein content increases, so does hydration requirements. As protein increases in strong, modern, gluten-rich wheat flour, mixing time is increased, or rest times are increased, or reducing agents are used, or all of the above. Mix times are not arbitrary numbers made up by someone. They are based on averaged Farinogrpah curve data for a particular flour type, which has been translated down by chefs and bakers to act as a guideline for many recipes and bakery product formulations.
Thank you for watching the video. If you liked what you saw, please give me a like and a subscribe. It really helps me out as I'm getting this channel going here. And be sure to check out some of the other videos that I have sitting right over here. We'll see you next time. No BS Baking.